Stone Brothers production.
Aloha, today I'll be talking about mass murderers and unidentified serial killer in Hawaii. I couldn't find any identified serial killers in my research, so I'm going to talk about one identified serial killer and two mass murderers. Number 3. Mass murderer Orlando Canal Sr. There were a few events prior to making Canal angry and caused a mass murder of 4 people on August 25, 1991 in Honolulu, Hawaii. Canal was testifying at a trial on February 15, 1991 when he injured his back while working at his job at Young Laundry. Not being able to work and having a hard time obtaining his workers' compensation, Canal became despondent. Around the same time of this, his wife Mabel began having an affair with co-worker David, who worked at her part-time job. After he found out his suspicions came true, he would call and threaten David and his family with violence. Around the same time that was happening, his wife left him to live with her parents, the Dela Cruzes. Canal Jr., aged 13, was continuing to live with his father. Mabel testified at a trial on Saturday, August 24, 1991, and she was at Canal's home to pick up her son. They go by Junjun, and Canal began to go crazy. Canal pointed a gun at Mabel and begged her to move back in with him. When she refused, Canal pointed the gun at his head and he said he'll shoot himself, but Mabel convinced Canal to not shoot himself and persuaded Canal to give her the gun. After she yelled out to Junjun to help her, Canal stopped her and threatened to kill both her and Junjun. When Junjun came to help, Mabel signaled to him that he had a gun and Junjun left the house. After they stopped arguing, both her and Canal went to look for Junjun, but a neighbor took Mabel back to the Dela Cruzes in Waipahu. That night and the following day, Mabel called Canal periodically to see if Junjun returned home, but she learned that he did not return. Around 7 p.m. on August 25, 1991, Junjun's girlfriend dropped him off at the Dela Cruz's house. Mabel told her son to call his father to pick him up, but they got into an argument and Canal blamed Mabel for accusing him of turning Junjun against him over the phone. Mabel, Junjun, and the Dela Cruzes ate dinner before sleeping that night and watching TV. Mabel was sleeping on the couch at her parents' house and she awoke to the sound of the front door being slammed open. When Mabel looked up, she saw a silver-colored gun and she was shot along the side of her head. She survived and tried crawling to her brother and father's room while getting kicked and punched by the intruder, not seeing their face. Mabel's father awoke and came out of his room and tried to stop the suspect, but he was shot by the man. Junjun said he was on the floor sleeping next to the television. He awoke to the sound of his mother yelling his name. When he awoke, he saw his father Canal under the light from the balcony, and then Junjun's father shot him in the mouth. Junjun managed to escape and run down the stairs to a neighbor's home. Mabel's brother Diego de la Cruz mentioned he awoke to the sound of gunshots and heard Mabel screaming in the living room. He helped his wife and child climb out to safety, and as he was outside, he heard his father slamming on his bedroom door, moaning in pain. When Diego climbed back inside, he found his mother dead, shot 7 times, bent over a sofa, and his father before he died with 3 gunshot wounds covered in blood. One neighbor named Rosemary heard a loud noise of a pipe falling on cement and then heard 6 gunshots. She looked towards the Dela Cruz's house and saw a man in dark clothing reloading his gun. Another neighbor saw a man with a gun and ran to a Chevrolet truck and drive away. Barbara Fitzpatrick, a neighbor of the Tuchets, which is David's brother Michael and Michael's wife Wendy, heard a glass breaking and followed by a small explosion. She saw a Filipino man wearing dark clothing and holding something running back to his truck, driving away quickly. Wendy awoke to Michael screaming and saw him on fire, screaming, "Orlando is here," which is Canal's first name. Soon after, Wendy was on fire, trying to run to the bathroom for water, but the fire was too hot. Michael and Wendy struggled to get out of the house from the front door, but it was locked from the outside somehow. Wendy eventually managed to get to the kitchen door where someone pulled her out. Both children of Michael's brother David died to thermal burns and smoke inhalation at the scene. Michael died soon after on September 23, 1991 as a result of severe burns over 80% of his body. Fire investigator mentioned that their house was intentionally started on fire with gasoline being poured into the house, starting separately in the living room and bedroom. He committed one last crime by setting a fire on the 2nd floor of the Young Laundry's building where he worked, but thankfully the sprinkler system put out the fire. The place is open 24 hours a day, so thankfully no one was hurt while working there. Another fire investigator, Warner Puccini, mentioned that the fire was intentionally set with combustible liquid. Charles Robinson, Canal's tenant, identified that all the gas cans found at the Young Laundry's premises being as the same ones Canal kept in his tool shed. As Canal was driving home, police knew of the events that happened, which Honolulu police officers Robert Burns and George Clark saw Canal's license plate and followed him. When Canal arrived home, he began to exit his truck to open the gate to his driveway, but saw both officers shouting at him to stop with his hands up. Both officers feared for their safety after approaching Canal, seeing that he kept his left hand in his vehicle, and they shouted to him to lie face down on the ground, but he wasn't complying. Both officers eventually obtained him after a scuffle of him yelling and kicking after sweeping his feet from under him to arrest Canal. Detective Santos found an empty shell in his truck that matched the shells recovered from the De La Cruz's and Tuchet's homes. On August 30th, 1991, 12-year-old Justin was snorkeling in Mokulia when he found a gun and a sledgehammer lying at the bottom of the ocean and gave the evidence to police. In some shrubs on the beach, police recovered a pair of white Reebok shoes, gray socks, a black vinyl jacket with an empty bottle in his pocket, a pair of jeans, a maroon belt, and another empty brown bottle. They found more evidence in the jeans pocket, linking all the evidence to Canal. Canal was convicted for the attempted murder of his wife Mabel, Michael Tuchet, brother of Mabel, and Wendy Tuchet. He also received first-degree murder convictions for Mabel's parents and David's 2 children, but not for Michael, who died a month later from his injuries. He received another 3 convictions on using a firearm during a felony, terroristic threats, and criminal property damage of the premises of his employer, Young Laundry. One of his convictions were reversed for terroristic threatening and another one on count 2, but he was convicted on all other crimes. Orlando Canal Sr. was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on April 7, 1993. Number 2. Unidentified serial killer Honolulu Strangler. The Honolulu Strangler was the first and only serial killer in Hawaii that has spawned in their state due to the difficulty of escaping and hiding. Investigators believe he started his killings and rapes in 1985, maybe even earlier, other sources stated. His first known victim was Vicki Gail Purdy, who was a 25-year-old female and a spouse of a military man named Gary Purdy. She was going to go clubbing in Waikiki with some friends on May 29, 1985, but failed to meet with her friends. She was raped and strangled with her arms bound behind her back after failing to meet her friends after taking a taxicab to pick up her car. Her husband told police that he expected her death to be associated with her job as a pornographic film saleswoman, where 2 other women were stabbed to death a year earlier. His second known victim was Regina Sakamoto, a 17-year-old female of Waipahu High School. She missed her bus to go to school on January 14, 1986, where she went missing. Her body was found in Kihei Lagoon, where her lower garments were removed and her arms were bound in the same position behind her back. At this point, detectives figured out it was the same killer because of the same method of the first victim. The third victim was 21-year-old Denise Hughes, and she was working as a secretary for a telephone company who was active in her church. She didn't show up to work on January 30th of 1986. Her body was found by 3 fishermen, and her body was wrapped up in a tarp with her arms bound and had been sexually assaulted like the rest of his victims. When detectives were notified by a third body, a serial killer task force was established for the first time on February 5th, 1986. The last 2 known victims of the Honolulu Strangler was Luis Medeiros and Linda Pesky, one being 25 years old and the last victim being 36 years old. The last known victim was on Sand Island after a psychic told the 43-year-old man who gave detectives a tip. An informant took the police to the exact location of Linda's body, but she was found where the 43-year-old man stated. With the help of the task force and the FBI, the Honolulu Police Department set up a 27-person task force to find the Honolulu Strangler. It was thought that the serial killer was unhappy in a relationship and worked in areas the attacks took place. At the time of the last victim's murder, the police set up roadblocks and questioned frequent commuters. One commuter told police that they'd seen a light-colored van and a Caucasian or mixed-race man with the last victim's car. The informant was described as a Caucasian, middle-aged, clean-cut, receding hairline with black glasses. He was also polite, stated by an assistant manager and a waitress at a La Marina sailing club. He was a regular customer who seemed a little too interested in her at the time. A few days later, he was hauled off in cuffs after almost offering a ride for another victim. The suspect's ex-wife and girlfriend provided incriminating fetish clue. She said that they both liked bondage and he had put her hands bound behind her back, which was the same way the victims died. Allegedly, he also left the same nights as the murders took place. He was interrogated and even failed polygraphy tests, but was eventually released due to lack of concrete evidence. Police continued to follow the suspect, and a $25,000 reward was put out for information of the subject if captured. 2 months later, after the suspect's arrest, a woman came forward and saw Pesky with a man on a night of the murder. She also picked him out in the photo lineup. They had to release the suspect due to circumstantial evidence, and the unidentified suspect was never charged. A rumor stated he got off on a technicality and moved to California shortly after his release and died in 2005. Do you think the previous man could have been the suspect because of his fetishes like the victims? Or do you think that he is not and the other questioned suspect is still out there? I would love to know everyone's opinion, so let me know in the comments below. Number 1. Mass murderer Byron Uyasugi, aka the Xerox Murders. Byron was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, and lived in a neighborhood of Nuuanu. He attended Roosevelt High School and was a member of the school's Army JROTC chapter while being a member of the school's riflery team. All of Byron's classmates remembered him as being a quiet student who never got in trouble. Once he got a head injury from a crash when he was driving his dad's car, he was never the same. This led him to a job being employed by Xerox as a technician since 1984. He had some hobbies like breeding goldfish and koi, which he'd sell to local pet stores to make some extra cash. He also had an extensive list of firearms. Byron started acting weird since his mother died in 1988 and complained that he had a poking sensation in his head. His troubles began soon afterward. He was transferred to another work group, which means new co-workers and personalities. Byron had a tough time adjusting to this and his new head trauma. He started making false accusations of harassment and product tampering against fellow repairmen. Former coworkers who knew him stated that other coworkers allegedly shamed him from other groups, which made him feel isolated from other coworkers and tensions built up. He even made threats towards other coworkers. In 1993, he told his brother that he was seeing shadows that would pin him down and do things he would not understand. This led him to undergo psychiatric evaluation and anger management classes after he kicked in and damaged an elevator door. Byron was arrested for third-degree criminal property damage. Workers told the psychiatrist that he spoke about carrying out a mass shooting at his workplace if he was ever to be fired. The psychiatrist working on his case deemed him not to be dangerous. He said he's seen shadows and heard voices, stating that he thinks there was a conspiracy that his home was bugged and watched. He even had a priest to help him, but even the minister expected him to have a mental illness. His father even asked his son to see a new psychiatrist, but he denied his father's wishes. This is when he took his last straw, when he started using new machines while at work, and he would constantly be in fear when he wouldn't understand it. The day prior to the shooting, he refused to train and learn the new machine that his manager suggested. On the morning of November 2nd, 1999, he reported to work at the Xerox building and opened fire with a 9mm Glock to his coworkers. Byron killed his supervisor, 6 other coworkers, and fired in the direction of another coworker who fled the building. After the shooting, he escaped in a company van, and police started to close off several streets in downtown Honolulu as they were investigating the crime scene. By mid-morning, the police had Byron cornered in the mountains above downtown Honolulu. After nearly a 5-hour standoff, Byron surrendered to the police shortly after 3 p.m. Dr. Wellner, who believed he wasn't insane because of his own well-being, caused a mass shooting. Opinions differ on this topic, but Byron eventually was accused of being sane and guilty of a month-long trial. He was convicted on 7 first-degree murders and 1 attempted murder, and he received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. At least for the family of the victims, they all got compensation due to a lawsuit which Xerox and hospital ended up paying. Byron is now currently held in the Tallahatchie County Correctional Facility in Tutwiler, Mississippi. He is still alive and well, but is struggling due to overcrowding and inadequate facilities to house a prisoner in isolation. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share, and subscribe because this continued support drives me to finish this series. Next up on the list is Idaho, so I'll see you next time.